Jalowitz, Dobro Jalowitz. Again, that is welcome in Russian. So we want to practice that word, Dobro Jalowitz, for when we take you to Russia. And then we'll be over there and we'll be saying Dobro Jalowitz. But that's probably a month or two off, so we won't worry a whole lot about that. But we will practice some other Russian words as we go along here. So welcome to We'll Sing and We'll Shout. And we have a lot to sing and shout about tonight. And one of the things that I would say about this amazing show of mine is that it's pretty small, it's pretty meager. I don't really have a lot of people following me, maybe more than I realize. Maybe there's more people catching the replay. What was interesting is interesting to me perhaps, when I was doing it on Facebook, I could actually see who was watching me on replay. And now that I'm using this Restream service, I really can't see what's going on. Facebook doesn't record the restreams, or yeah, it doesn't record the replays in the same way. So unless somebody's watching me live, I really don't know who is exactly watching me, if anyone. And that knowledge that people are watching and people care is actually very helpful. So if you do enjoy what I'm doing and you do appreciate my efforts, your likes and your comments make a big difference, and I appreciate those. And I appreciate everyone who would care or take the time to listen. But I will also say this though: I do this program because I feel inspired to do it. I feel inspired to do this, and I do it for myself. I do this to for those who care to listen. I do this for my ancestors, and I do this for my mom. And I also do it because I feel called to do it. And I do feel like I have a lot to sing and a lot to shout about. And I do it because I believe that my real objective here isn't to see how many mortal Facebook followers or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or any other type of followers, or how many people I can, and help transform their life and use products that allow them to do that. My real effort here is to get people to, or I'm sorry, not get people, but to get the armies of heaven to sing and shout with me. Because I know when the armies of heaven link in here with me, and I feel that to some degree already, but I know when that time comes, when the armies of heaven are singing and shouting with me, all these other issues will seem pretty minor and be rapidly taken care of. So, so that's my thought on that tonight. I wanted to talk about transformation here a little bit before I get into my story, because my story tonight comes from my missionary experience. It comes early in my mission. It was about 3 to 4 months into my mission that this happened, and it really was in many ways the most amazing thing that happened during my missionary experience. Now, there were a lot of good things, and we talked to a lot of amazing people down there, and we had some other uh, really good experiences too. And there were a lot of amazing things that happened to me during those 2 years. But as far as amazing things, an amazing thing happening to somebody else, uh, that really happened about 3 to 4 months into my mission in a way that I never would experience again, even though I tried from that day forward. And it was a spiritual transformation in somebody that was really quite astounding. And as I reflect back on it now, it's easier for me to really appreciate how astounding it really was. Because as a 20-year-old young man, I could appreciate it to some degree, but I couldn't appreciate it anywhere near as much as I do now. So we're going to share that story. And it was a very much a spiritual transformation that affected a person in deeply emotional and physical ways. But our physical and emotional and spiritual self are very much tied together. And I have had experiences in my life that I would call spiritual transformations, but I've also had other times when I would say that I've had emotional transformations, when another person has affected my life in a very powerful emotional way, and I have felt that, and that has impacted my both my physical and my spiritual well-being, and likewise positive ways. And I've also had experiences like I've had here the last 8 months of having my physical life transformed in amazing ways. The thing about the physical transformation that I've experienced here the last 8 months is that I feel like I have complete control over this. I feel like I now have complete control to not only hang on to this transformation, but to continue to see it grow and develop within me. And that is something that I have a strong desire to share with others. The issue with an emotional transformation is if the other party pulls that emotion out of your life, all of a sudden you're left without it, and you're left wondering, perhaps why. Like, why did I feel all that? Why did I experience all that? And why was that all taken away from me? I would say this, I experienced that a few times during some of my early dating relationships where a young woman would come in come into my life for a period of time, and then she would exit my life, and that would have a big impact on me. And likewise with spiritual transformations, sometimes we are hit very hard by some spiritual things, and I say that in a positive way. We can be hit very hard by some spiritual things and not necessarily know or understand where they all came from or why. And unless we understand those things and understand those laws that allow that to come about, we may experience some really powerful spiritual things, and then those may fall back out of our life. So that's a few notes on transformation from my life, but those three things all affect each other, and it may be one that kicks off the others, or it may be it may be the spiritual that kicks off the physical and emotional. It may be the emotional that launches the physical and spiritual. And in my case recently, it may be the physical change that really keys you into your emotional and spiritual self and the emotional world around you. So a few thoughts on transformation. So this experience I had as a missionary, I went into the missionary training center. I think it was around December 14th of 1986. And my friend Sandra, who I had talked about the other night, Sandra Gallagher, is the one who took me up to the missionary training center, drove me there from Logan, Utah. I want to think that's about 2 hours away. She drove me in there, gave me a hug, and sent me on my way. Um, I spent about 2.5 weeks in the missionary training center here in Provo. That is literally a half mile from where I live. And on Christmas Eve, our missionary training center president, George Durant, had Marie Osmond come and sing to us. And that was kind of a special treat to have Marie there as a uh, newly married young gal come and sing to us on Christmas Eve. So that was fun. And then on December 30th, my time in the missionary training center was done because I wasn't learning a language. Fortunately, in Australia, they spoke English, even though it was a maybe slightly different form of English. But we got in a van there in front of the missionary training center, went to the Salt Lake airport, and I was looking at my flight itinerary here recently. I actually flew to San Francisco, and then flew from San Francisco to Honolulu, and then flew from Honolulu to Sydney, Australia, and then flew from Sydney, Australia to Adelaide, Australia. So that was 4 different flight segments. I think it was about, trying to think here, I think it was about 40 hours worth of travel. I completely skipped December 31st of 1986. It's a day that doesn't even exist in my life because we crossed the international date line. So no December 31st, 1986. I jumped right into January 1st in Adelaide, Australia. And I had left Provo, where it was very dry and cold, and they dropped us into Adelaide, where it was about 90, maybe even upwards of 100 degrees. And it wasn't like super humid there in Adelaide, but it was certainly more humid than Provo. So wow, dramatic change. The first area that I served in there in Australia, after I got a little training in a mission home for a day or two, we jumped on my new companion and I, Elder Barry Dutton. We got on a bus, and I think we went about 8 hours across up around the bay. Is that the Bay of Adelaide? I'm not sure, but we went around the bay and landed down in Port Lincoln, South Australia. And Port Lincoln was a town of about 10,000 people, which was very similar in size to my hometown of Bellevue, Ohio. And they they had these great big grain operations where they would be able to load grain ships there out into the water. And I wish I had some pictures. It'd be great if we could have more pictures sometimes. But one of the other things that was kind of interesting about Port Lincoln was that the movie Jaws was filmed. Lots of the main portions of the movie Jaws was there filmed there near Port Lincoln, and it was filmed there because that was an area the great white sharks would frequent. So you didn't do a lot of swimming in the water there in Port Lincoln, and of course, as missionaries, we weren't doing a lot of swimming anyway. So the other thing that they did in Port Lincoln is they had these big tuna boats. They would come in there and they would unload these tuna with grapples. And as they were moving from the boat to wherever they were dropping the tuna into the container or whatever, sometimes a tuna, these live tuna, would work their way loose from the grapple and fall back down in the water. And at that point, the tuna is pretty excited because he feels like, hey, I'm free, I'm out of here. The only problem is that there were sharks waiting down there in the water because they knew that often the tuna would slip out of the grapple, and so you would see these sharks down there in the water as they unloaded the tuna boats. At least that's kind of how I recall that experience. So my first couple months were there in Port Lincoln, Australia, serving with Elder Dutton, and then on March 10th, it shows in my journal, and I've got this missionary journal right here. This was a three-ring binder kind of journal that I think I picked up at the MTC. I was writing pretty faithfully during January and February from our Port Lincoln flat. And when I say flat, I'm talking about an apartment. So I was writing pretty regularly there, and I've got some good pictures here. But one of the things that happened to me as a missionary out there was I was super active before I went on my mission. I was exercising a lot every day, playing a lot of basketball, running around our 4.5 mile country block, jump roping, just lots of exercise. And when I hit the mission field, all of a sudden that is all significantly reduced. And I also lost control of my diet. And so I started putting on weight rather rapidly. I probably put 10 pounds on just in the MTC alone. And by the time I was out 4 months, I had gained 30 pounds and I was up around 195 pounds. So, with all that extra weight that I was carrying, those first 4 months, and particularly month 3 and 4, were really difficult. They were really difficult times. And the clothes that I wore, the suits that we had purchased there at the Sandusky Mall no longer fit. And so I had to go to a secondhand store and buy some blue, I think it was kind of like pinstriped a little bit, but blue pinstripe suit that was much larger than anything that I would have ever have wanted to wear. And and I had to wear that for a few months there while I tried to get things under control. I did not bring my unamate down here tonight. You would think that I would learn these lessons. But on March 10th, my journal shows that I got transferred from Port Lincoln back to the city of Adelaide in the West Lakes area. And I took a bus, or let's see, how did I get back there? I think we went back in a car with a senior missionary couple. I don't remember those details, but so I was serving in the West Lakes area, and I was serving with a young man named Elder Bartlett, Richard Bartlett. And Richard was from Suffolk, England. He was a good English boy, and he spoke like a Brit. And he was actually my companion in the missionary training center. So we knew each other, fairly well after having spent 2.5 weeks together. And so we got to be companions, very young missionary companions, since we were both only out just around two months. We got to serve together there in West Lakes, and it was really fun to serve with Elder Bartlett again. He was a very maybe a little bit shy, very humble, very willing to not necessarily somebody who was going to take the lead, but he was a very good follower. He was willing to go and do whatever I wanted to do, and at that point, I was a pretty serious, pretty strident-minded missionary about a lot of things. And I wanted to get to work and do the things that we were supposed to do as missionaries. But one of the things that I note here as I was looking at this journal tonight is there's just not a lot here during the month of March and April. And I know why that is. It's because I would come home from doing missionary work all day long, And with all that extra weight, I would just feel exhausted. I would just feel tired and exhausted. And sitting down and writing in my journal was just not something that I had a lot of energy for during those months. So there's only like 4 entries for the month of March, and I think I'm seeing about the same thing for the month of April. So this experience that I'm going to share with you, I was hoping that I could find, some really good date details in my journal. And the reality is, there's only one entry. There is literally one sentence in here about this experience, which is crazy. Like, this was the most amazing thing that happened during my 2 years in Australia. And there is literally one sentence in my journal about it. And that is because I really didn't understand the miracle of what was going on while it was going on. But here's how this develops. So Monday, as missionaries in most missions around the world, is what we call P Day, or preparation day. It's not the one day a week when you get to pee. It's actually just preparation day. Missionaries can do that all week long, just like everybody else. So Monday's P Day, and we would do our shopping, and we would often get together with some other missionaries and play basketball or do some other kind of sporting exercise activity. I do remember during this time frame we also played some rugby. We played some rugby because there were a lot of Maoris from New Zealand in the mission, and some other Polynesians from other areas. And the Australian missionaries also like to play rugby. So we were playing full on rugby there for a couple of weeks until President Gray found out that we were playing rugby. And then we weren't playing rugby anymore. But we had fun playing rugby there for a few weeks. And as a rough and tough farm boy, the Polynesians didn't scare me off at all. But they were pretty good size. I got to hand it to them. They were some good sized boys. But I also really enjoyed playing basketball against those Polynesian guys. Elder Cooper, Elder Harris. These are both, Elder Cooper in particular is one that I just remember really enjoying playing basketball with, and just talking smack with him. And in fact, he and I just had a little message back and forth here, literally just like 2 days ago on Facebook. But on a Monday night, I was talking about preparation day. I'm getting off on tangents. On a Monday night, preparation day, P Day, is supposed to end at 6 p.m. And you can use that Monday evening a lot of missionaries would use that as time to plan, to do your planning for the next week. But you could also go out and do tracting, like it's regular missionary time. You're supposed to be doing missionary work. And because I was feeling very motivated about the work, and because I was anxious to, create miracles and conversions, I decided, and Elder Bartlett tagged along and decided with me, that we would get busy and go out and knock on some doors on this Monday night. And so we would often kneel down and pray about where we should go. And we felt inspired to go to this one street that was just a couple blocks away. And I looked at the map of West Lakes recently, and I think I identified this street, but I don't have it in front of me tonight. So let's not get too worried about that. But it was a couple blocks away. We walked to this particular street and we started knocking on doors. And I want to say that this was like maybe the fifth house or maybe the seventh, somewhere right between 5 and 7 houses that we knocked on. And these are rather small homes. And the neat thing about Australia and Adelaide, and I think this is true for a lot of English inspired communities, is each little home had its own little fence and gate. And so you're going in and out all these little gates all the time. And it was really, pretty cute and pretty fun. And everybody has kind of their own style, and everybody has, their own thing going on. So we're going out in and out these gates, maybe having a few conversations. Nothing's really hitting yet. But we come to this particular house, and this is coming right off of Steve's memory here. Like, I've got nothing here, I've got no notes, but I can relive this experience pretty easily. We come to this particular house, and knock on the door, and this woman comes to the door, and she is in tears, and she's pretty emotionally distraught. She is about 65 years old, which, as I sit here now, that seems really old. And that is literally just 5 years older than I am. But Marie Bryant was her name, and she's about 65 years old. She had been drinking some, She also smoked a little bit, and maybe she smelled of smoke a little bit. I don't remember that detail, but I do remember that she did smoke some. She drank coffee and tea, pretty normal English gal, but she had been drinking. And based on her red nose and some other things, it was pretty apparent that was Marie was drinking pretty regularly. But she told us that she was literally praying that God would send somebody to her door, and she was kind of in tears and really distraught, and she was really I don't want to say she was suicidal, but she was really having a hard time, and she had lost her husband about I don't remember if it was a year earlier or maybe 2 years earlier, but it wasn't that long ago that she had lost her husband, which was very distressing to her. And her husband was some kind of Australian war veteran, and as I remember, and I don't remember what his name was, and of course I didn't meet him at all. But she felt like we had come there as an answer to her prayers. And she told us that. She's like, I had been praying that God would send somebody to my door to help me. And so she let us in. And because she had been drinking, it really wasn't the right time for us to try and share a missionary message with her. It really wasn't time to we need the spirit to help us in this situation, and that this was the wrong kind of spirit. So we sat down and calmed Marie down and talked to her some and kind of got her background and her story, and then we said, hey, can we come back tomorrow night? Can we come back tomorrow night? We see, you're pretty stressed out here tonight, but we do feel like we were sent here as an answer to your prayer. We'd like to come back and share some things with you. And so, hey, let us come back tomorrow night and share our first lesson, our first discussion. And we probably spent a half hour, 45 minutes with her there, just calming her down and visiting with her. And we left that night, and we thought, wow, this is amazing. We went out on a Monday night and we found this, miracle person, and she's going to have us come back tomorrow night, and we're going to teach her a lesson. And it had gotten late enough now, and it was dark, and it was time to go home. So we didn't knock any more doors that night, but we only knocked, five, six, maybe the seventh door. So we went back the next evening, and she was in a much better frame of mind, and she hadn't been drinking. So we sat down and we taught her our first discussion. And I'm not going to try to teach LDS missionary discussions here tonight across Facebook Live, but we taught her our first discussion, and we asked her to read some things in the scriptures, likely read some things from the Bible, but we also asked her to read some things from the Book of Mormon, some select passages, not a lot, but just a little homework assignment that she would read while we were gone. And so we left, and here's where things get a little fuzzy for me, because there are 6 discussions, and I don't remember whether this was when we came back for the second discussion or the third, but I think this happened right away. I think this happened between our what was our second and our third visit. It happened after we had taught her the first discussion. So we would come back 2 days later. That was kind of standard practice to kind of space the lessons out a little bit. We came back there 2 days later on a Thursday, and she decided that she would have us over for dinner that night as a part of she would cook us a good Aussie meal with some potatoes and some lamb and whatever else this all was. And so we came there that night, and there was this different feeling. There was a different feeling when we walked into her home that night, and she wanted to know our first names. And typically we wouldn't, we typically wouldn't share that information willingly or upfront. But if somebody asks us what our names were, it's not like some big deal for us to say, my name's Steve and my name's Richard, but our names are really Elder Bartlett and Elder Hanson. But as we sit down to eat, she starts calling us Steve and Richard. And then she lets us know that she had been talking to her Church of England pastor, and he kind of convinced her that while we might be nice young men, we were really maybe a little confused young men, and there really wasn't much that we had to offer to help her. And that's not exactly what she said, perhaps, but that's exactly what she meant. Her pastor had basically told her that that was just happenstance. We weren't really there as an answer to her prayer. and she really didn't need to be listening to us or doing what we were telling her. So now, what's also interesting is if that was really the case, why didn't the pastor show up on her door when she needed him so much that night? But we didn't try to approach that topic. As we ate dinner with her and visited, I became more and more uncomfortable with the situation, and more frustrated that we were losing this. Well, it felt like a golden investigator. I really was struggling with this, and I don't think I really got emotionally confrontational with her there at the dinner table. But after dinner, we went and sat down in the living room again, and that's when I just felt inspired to just really get into her emotionally here a little bit. And I said, Marie, and the other thing is at dinner, it was like she wanted to just treat us as friends now. And like I said, she was calling us by our first names. We're just going to be friends and buddies. I like you guys. You're welcome to come and visit in my home, but but you're not like my pastor, and and uh, and we're just you're not really somebody who can help me. So I found that a little concerning, a little disturbing, a little offensive, whatever all that combination was. So when we sat down there, I straightened right up and I said, look, Marie, we were sent here to bless your life. We were sent here to help you, as you well know, and as you said, we were sent here as an answer to your prayer. And Elder Bartlett, poor Elder Bartlett, is just sitting over there, a little stunned at how direct and forceful I was being with her. But I was very direct and forceful about the fact that she needed to take us seriously, that we'd been sent there to help her, and she needed to listen to us, and she needed to do the things that we were asking her to do, primarily reading the things that we were asking her to read. And that's kind of where we left that night. I kind of decided that our visit was over. We probably left her with a prayer. I don't necessarily remember that we did or didn't do that, but I do know that we left, somewhat abruptly because I just felt like this is over. This visit is over. The purpose of this visit is over. You need to do what we're asking you to do and read what we're asking you to read. So this was a Thursday. We went home, and I can tell you that that walk home felt pretty dejected. We felt pretty discouraged and pretty dejected as we walked that probably about a half mile back to our West Lakes flat. And we would have some kind of a missionary training the next excuse me, the next 2 days. It seems like, I don't know, for some reason we were going to be pretty much engaged for the next 4 days, and we would not see her till the following Tuesday, because of course Monday was PD again, and maybe that we already had some other commitment for Monday night, but I don't think we would see Marie until the following Tuesday. And I really didn't think that we were going to bring this situation back to life, but we were at least going to go back and try and see. So we went back the following Tuesday, and and this and this was really pretty amazing. This is really where the story really shifted in a huge way, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions here so that I can share it. We came to her door, and she opened the door, and I found the most subdued person that I think I'd ever met. She was just completely subdued. She was emotionally subdued, and at that point I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on, but she was just completely subdued, and she let us in and led us into the living room and sat down. Hmm. And she picked up the Book of Mormon that we had left her, and she said that she had read it, and all we had asked her to do was read a couple chapters, a couple select verses, a couple small areas in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is like 621 pages. We probably asked her to read three. In those 4 days, she read the Book of Mormon. And she just sat there like, tell me what to do next. And I was just stunned. I was just stunned at what had happened to her. Now, my mom had this experience of reading the Book of Mormon in Germany, and I think she spent about a week doing it. I don't know. My mom was a pretty capable, energetic reader. Like she could plow through books, much like my younger brother David. I don't know that Cheryl and I are quite at that level, but mom and David could plow through books. But I think mom spent about a week reading the Book of Mormon. She didn't do it in 4 days. Marie, at age 65, somewhat distraught, alcoholic in nature, a lot of other difficult things going on in her life. She sat down and read that book in 4 days. And then she just sat there and looked at us like, what do I need to do now? And we taught her our next discussion. And it was the second discussion because it was the discussion where you commit people to get baptized. And usually, when you teach the second discussion, you go into that part of the discussion knowing that as much as you want this question to go well, very seldom is it going to go well. You want people to say yes, but that is a pretty life altering commitment there that most people are not ready to make at that point. So you ask the question because it's there in the second discussion, and you hope they're going to say yes, and you pray they're going to say yes. But 99 times out of 100, they don't say yes. They don't necessarily say no, but they're not saying yes most of the time, 99% of the time. I'm sure that's true globally, worldwide, in missionary work. I can't imagine that the success rate with that question in the second discussion is is much above 1%. Could be wrong. Prove me wrong. I'm happy to hear it. But based on my experience, that's probably where that's falling. So we asked her this question, and she said yes, she would get baptized. And at that point, it is hard to figure out what, what we're even saying. But we finished our discussion with her that night, and we had a prayer, and and we talked to her. I guess I don't remember at what point we began to talk to her about the word of wisdom and the fact that we needed her to give up tea and coffee and alcohol and tobacco. I don't remember. I know that was part of, I don't think it's part of the third discussion. I think it's part of the fourth discussion. But I think we tackled that issue right away because we knew it was an issue for her. And she wasn't going to get baptized unless she understood and agreed to do that. The amazing thing is that she did. She just said, okay. And on that night, I think it was that night, we went into her kitchen and we threw away all this stuff and we dumped the alcohol down the drain and we threw the cigarettes and the coffee and the tea away. And I think we grabbed the trash can, the trash bags, and threw them out in her trash. So it wasn't easy to, um, to my knowledge, from that day forward, that woman did not smoke or drink coffee or tea or alcohol from that day forward. Now, was there some point in her life where she regressed and maybe had one of those? I don't know the answer to that question, but I know for the 2 years that I was in Australia, Marie was a faithful, active um, Latter-day Saint. She was a faithful member of the church. She went every week, and and it was an amazing transformation. I know people who will spend years trying to get those habits out of their lives. I know people who will go to 12-step programs and other things in order to try to overcome those kind of serious habits. And she had this. She was alcoholic. It showed up in her nose and in her face. And and yet, by reading the Book of Mormon in 4 days, there was enough of a spiritual transformation there, enough of a spiritual subduing in this woman's life that she was literally able to just drop those things. And that is a case of where the spirit has been impacted so hard that it literally just takes the physical body with it, and the physical body like just doesn't even care at that point. Now that's a unique experience, and it's hard to repeat. And I spent the next 20 months of my time in Australia trying to see that experience repeat again. And although I experienced a lot of other good things and I saw other transformations, I never saw anything of that magnitude again. And that all happened during what was the most difficult, challenging part of my mission. And it doesn't even show up here in this journal other than one sentence that now I'm not even sure where that sentence is at, but it just notes we have a baptismal commitment in one Marie Bryant and are striving and working with her to bring her into the church. That is it. That is the only sentence I have on that entire story that I just shared with you. So, pretty amazing. I got to grab a tissue here. Pretty amazing that me, the writer, the history recorder, the journal keeper, would only recognize the value of that story to the extent of putting one sentence in his journal. Because I just assumed this is just what we do. This is what we do as missionaries. We knock on doors, we create miracles, we transform lives, and we just do this every day, every week, every month. This is just going to keep happening. So there's no reason to get overly excited about it. There's no reason to write a whole page about it or create a story. Just throw a sentence in here and let's go on to the next one. That's not how that worked out. That's not what happened. So, but the other thing that I wanted to share about this story, and we're getting pretty lengthy here, we're coming up on 40 minutes, so we're going to wrap up pretty quickly here. But as much as that whole experience hit me as a young man at age 20, as much as I felt all that and I saw that change, I really couldn't appreciate the miracle of what had taken place there. And it wasn't, and even then, when this happened, even when what I'm about to tell you happened, I still didn't completely grasp the miracle. But it was about a month or so later, um, the sister missionary, Sister Kellogg, and I can't remember if this was Sister Summers or who her companion might have been, but they started teaching Marie's daughter. Marie had a daughter and maybe a son. I never met the son, but the daughter lived somewhat locally, and the daughter had two or three kids. I don't remember ever meeting the daughter's husband, but the sister missionaries, because the daughter lived in a different area, they started teaching this daughter. Here's the thing I can't tell you. I can't tell you if the daughter ever joined the church. I don't have that information. I just know that they were teaching her at this time. And they came to the Torrens Chapel there, near Westlake, the Torrens Chapel where I spent about 8 months of my mission, playing basketball on P days and going to church there and teaching Katrina Campbell and other things like that. But there at the Torrens Chapel, on what it would have been the northwest corner, this was the first time I met this daughter of Marie's, and the sister missionaries were there. And this was a very humbling experience here. She got out of the car, and the sister missionaries were kind of like, "Oh, this is Elder Hanson," and and this daughter looked at me like I must be from another planet because she had so much gratitude in her heart for what had happened to her mother. And I never understood until I've gotten older what a drain and what a concern and what a load that must have been for this daughter to deal with this mother who was alcoholic and, borderline suicidal, um, not feeling like she had any reason to live, struggling deeply in her physical problems, and trying to raise and as a mother, as a daughter, as a mother, trying to raise her own two or three kids. while having to think about and dealing with this alcoholic mother. And she looked at me like I was literally from another planet. And it was like, what did you do to my mother? And how did you do that? and I and I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't do anything. I just told her to read the Book of Mormon. I'm just I'm just a farm kid from south of Bellevue, Ohio. I didn't I didn't do this. I was just there. But she was convinced, and Marie must have told her that I was the one who did that. And so it was really in the daughter's eyes that I could really see what that experience had really been and what that experience had really meant to her. And as I've said, I don't know that the daughter got baptized. Maybe she did. I got transferred far away, like 7 miles. I got transferred 7 hours away, and eventually, and kind of lost track of that situation. There are other stories. There is another story tied to Marie later in my mission where we actually baptized a friend of hers, and we'll share that story on another night, as we are now about 42 minutes into this. But I did want to share this amazing story of as my time as a missionary. And it's amazing how, to me, it's amazing how during the most difficult time of my mission was when this most amazing miracle happened. And so that is very much a spiritual transformation. And as I said, I saw Maria. I saw Marie before I left Australia, nearly 20 months later, and she was still an active, grateful, amazing member of the church. Uh, Her bishop would talk to me about her and just tell me, how grateful they were to have her in the ward and what a great sister she was. And the fact that she was able to just drop those things that night and change her life is really astounding. And so that's my message tonight. I could probably keep harping away here for a while, but let's just bring it to a halt. If you have listened through all this or caught it on the replay, I really appreciate anybody who's willing to catch my messages. But I can tell you this: the armies of heaven are have really enjoyed this message tonight, and I know that they are singing and shouting. So, with that thought, I will leave you, and we will catch you tomorrow.